how do you balance all of this, right? Like all of these crazy ideas and all of these personal work and desire to evolve, to push?
I go about it by exactly doing that, the balance. Like back at ILM, I had to be my best. There's no balance of the force. There's no balance there.
Today we have Gio Nakpil. Gio is a senior design evangelist and creative director working at Adobe. He's deeply influenced by the magic of sci-fi and horror films. His multidisciplinary interests have led him to explore a variety of roles throughout his career, such as digital model supervisor at Industrial Light and Magic, ILM, 3D artist at Valve, and art director at Facebook. During his time in tech, Gio also took on the challenge of pioneering emerging consumer products for the world of virtual reality. Gio also shares insights into his current work, the fusion of personal and professional projects, the importance of sketching as a utility in the creative process. We also discuss philosophy in form of design, the balance between work and mental health, and influences that shape Gio's artistic journey. The conversation culminates in advice for inspiring artists of finding their unique voice and the significance of maintaining mental well-being in a demanding industry. I'm pretty sure you're gonna really enjoy this one, so let's get into it. Hey, Gio, man, thank you so much for coming. Huge fan for the longest time. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. This is quite an honor to be asked by you to do this. So thank you.
No way, I'm the one honored here. I'm so flattered that you came. Like it's been a while since we last talked, and you being busy, like you've been doing stuff always, right? Like what have you been up to? Like what have you been up to lately? I mean, personal work or professional work, whatever you want to talk about.
Well, I think the work that I'm doing right now is sort of like a good mixture of both professional and personal, sort of kind of fusing together, which, I'm very fortunate to have such a position because I've been just essentially creating things and showing off our tools and our apps in a way that, would hopefully inspire users to use it or form new ideas while using it if you're already a user, right? So for me, that's such a great position to be in because I could just like come up with concepts and obviously with sort of like I can't go too overboard, it's just like because sometimes my style can get pretty 1980s effects, practical effects gore, so I gotta kind of dial that down. Right. But yeah, I've just been kind of learning and being inspired by new things like with motion graphics, animation, Illustrator, like just you name it. I'm just kind of like consuming, constantly.
Do you have like some sort of like, well, maybe for work, but in general, like, do you have like some sort of schedule of things you need to hit? Like you need to be designing using these tools, or or is it like more free formed for you? Like you see like seeing something, because from the outside it feels like you're just having fun every day, but like is there like some sort of like teams, or the focus of this team now is kind of these tools that they're developing, let's explore some of those and maybe build like some sort of like marketing plan and stuff like that? I'm not sure how much you can share, but just high level.
Yeah, high level stuff. A lot of it is like kind of giving feedback for to the developers with projects that may sometimes not even see the light of day. I'm kind of like or projects we're doing for shows, for example, for GDC, Adobe Max, and stuff like that. So a lot of my time can actually also be spent doing sort of the internal projects. But for the external stuff, it kind of just feels like, it'd be cool if I do a crate,
I see.
But it has to, I definitely want to, I always plan it with a purpose. Like, okay, if I'm going to do this, it can't just be like, artsy fartsy, whatever I feel kind of is, what am I in the mood? I always try to kind of form it in a way that's like, it's communicating a point what is a new feature being shown, like for example for modeler, like the non-destructive primitives, designing something to hopefully show that in the best possible way, that's approachable and not too like, oh yeah, I don't get what the point of that is, so a lot of it I'm actually, like, not that it's imposed on us as much, it's just like I think it's on us as people who work here to really come up with something that makes sense in terms of like the work that we do out there, because at the end of the day, we our job is to help inspire people to go, oh, modeler does that, I want to try it, so there's a bit of psychology involved in there too that I for me personally, that I'm like, how can I convince people to to use this, how can I convince Glauco to
No, right on. And man, like looking at your career, and I've been following it for a very long time, but it almost feels like this is the pinnacle in a way, where you're just bringing everything you've done throughout the years together. Like you work in films, games, tech companies, and now you're kind of in this, like, I don't know, just in this like merging all of these things into this role, and into be able to kind of direct and create and develop and like push tools and all of these different projects, right? Like it felt like, looking back, it just feels like a very natural progression for you. Perfect fit. Like is it how you feel too, or?
No, I mean, when you put it that way, you're right, actually. Like, I never really, I look back in my career a lot of times, but yeah, you're right. Like it is sort of the culmination or combination of a lot of the stuff that I've done in the past, and and like people sometimes ask me like, how did you get to this point in your career? I'm like, I don't really know. I just follow what I feel my instincts tell me, right? Like so I was fortunate enough, or I am fortunate enough, to be in this point where it's like games, film, tech, like it's just like I'm putting all of that to use in what I'm doing now, and it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and that's amazing. The way I see, you representing a lot of the artists in the tech world in a way, right? Like pushing technology there. And I think we couldn't be better represented, so it's just awesome to see, because you like, and I mentioned this a couple times for you before, but you seem to always be pushing, not only like, like technology, let's make it more realistic, but like kind of pushing yourself to different fields. You mentioned like animation, graphic design, all of these different things where usually, like modelers or sculptors don't tend to really think about too much. And I remember you doing this kind of thing for a very long time, like kind of doing more unusual type of work, even if we look at the creature work, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit, but just kind of unexpected or kind of out of the norm, if you will. Is it like on purpose, like, hey, I don't want to fit into this box, or I want to be different, I want to carve my, what I'm saying? Like, or...
I think there's some of that for sure, because a part of me wants to kind of grow in a way that is sort of representative of my own kind of true interest, I guess, because I find that, and I find that it's true for myself too. Like I get easily caught up on like, oh, I want to do this, and I do, right? Yeah, the fan art, which I love. I'm not putting any of that stuff down. But I think by doing that, which I found myself doing a lot in the past, I felt like it wasn't really honing in on my true interest, and I've been lucky enough to have a lot of interest, right? Like like practical effects. I know, like that was your background too, sculpting and mask making. I love that. I love sci-fi. I love animated films, stylized animated films. So it's just kind of like trying to kind of, when I'm kind of rabbit holing into this particular thing that I kind of like do for a long period of time, I kind of want to pull myself into like, what is it do I really want to do? Where do I really want to go, right? And like I have this lofty goal of I want to like animate, I want to design like stylized animation characters, tell stories like everyone does. So I kind of almost have to push myself to kind of like, oh, no, wait, I'm doing too much of this. Where do I want to go to really grow, right? So right now I'm in this phase of like doing these sort of more stylized characters because I find that that is going to take me where eventually I want to be, ultimately. And if I keep doing the realistic stuff, which I still love, I may not achieve what I really want to do. So yeah, and so to answer your question, I think it's a mixture of like I just have really odd interests. Like I don't think I really fit in sort of the if you look at the 3D community, like the works that are very popular, I I kind of like don't really fit in that because I don't really like to detail stuff as much, or I wish I did. I wish I had the patience for that, but I'm just too lazy. I like kind of like really weird, almost if we're talking about monsters, I want like the disturbing shit. That's like kinda, instead of the more fantasy related. So a lot of it is my taste, but a lot of it is also like I need to kind of force myself to not relax.
Yeah, just pull some, some
Yeah,
stuff.
so yeah, this was Vincent Van Dyke's that ogre or the gargoyle, but yeah, like stuff like this, like this is weird. I feel like it's like weird stuff. I don't even know what I was thinking. I mean, this is more like regular sci-fi, but yeah, this.
Right. It's actually funny because I was pulling all of these images together, and I was thinking myself like, wow, Gio is so patient. He does all of this detailing and stuff, spend hours and hours detailing and all of that. That's interesting to hear that from you, actually, because that's not the impression that I had. That's cool.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
The impression of it's lazy detailing, kind of implied detail. I mean, there are projects that I actually spend that like if I'm gonna detail. I'll detail. Like this one, yeah. I'm going to put every single pore or dragon scale, So there is that side of me, but that's rare. Like that takes up so much of my mental capacity and time that I just like doing them. Like, this guy, I had to like hand detail all that stuff and these things. But for the most part, if you look at my stuff, it's just like forms.
More gestural.
Like, gestural stuff, yeah. And
I love that too. And you are very well recognized in the industry by having a very specific style on sculpting, this type of work that you do, not only the design, but I think the approach to sculpting, the form, very form oriented, right? Like I think you taught a class a couple years ago on that too. Like, where does that come from? What is your, background on that, right? Like, or where do you pull inspiration? Or the mindset, or where does that come from?
If I really were to kind of like look back, I would attribute all that to, and I always say this, I'll always give him credit, Carlos. Good timing, right? the man who designed that one, Carlos Huante, who taught me essentially the concept of primary, secondary, and tertiary forms, like way back in the day when I was still at ILM, where I just didn't really know how to break down anything. And so when he told me that process, it just clicked. So a lot of that comes from his teaching. And then from there, I just expanded on it. Because I think what gravitated me to his work, like many of us, right? Like is my fascination with just like odd forms and nature, like clouds, like I think we all do that, right? Or a lot of us do, like looking at clouds, you see something kind of interesting. So it's just kind of like taking all of that interest before I met him, and then when he taught me that, the philosophy, I would call it, it was just like, oh, okay, now it's a tool set. I'm able to use the philosophy of primary, secondary, tertiary into arranging shapes and make it look interesting. Like with a lot of these, that's what I try to do, stemming from looking at a lot of nature forms or even like, cars or just anything form related. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But I feel like without questioning your answer, like the whole like idea of primary, secondary forms, tertiary form, right? It's kind of one of like a very fundamental sort of idea, but I think the way you apply that concept, I think it's very different. And I think maybe the way that Carlos
went over with you is very specific to his work too. And I could see a lot of Carlos' influence in your work by the choices you make, right? Like the muscles, the anatomy distorted and all of that. But I think still comes off very unique on you. So I was actually curious, like, where do you usually draw inspirations from, like some of these things? Like, do you like looking at references? Because I feel I've been talking to some folks and some people don't like actually looking at references, maybe in the beginning stage, or what's your approach to that?
That's a really good question, actually. So I think, and I've been thinking a lot about this too, sort of the second layer to that answer, or the philosophy of form, like how do I use it and what makes it unique to myself? And it's going to sound artsy fartsy, but it's it's feelings. Like I kind of just going with a flow. It's almost like when I start anything, even with this Hulk, or I don't know exactly what the musculature is going to be, right? I mean, the basics, like primary, secondary, tertiary forms. That's the sort of the more analytical way of constructing it. But how do you make it feel like it's your mark, right? And I think with that, it's just a lot of it is sort of allowing myself to just kind of like turn a part of my brain off and just kind of like go with the flow is the only way I can kind of say. It's just kind of like, if I can kind of describe it in gestures, it's kind of just like going with wherever my hand takes me. Like, otherwise I wouldn't be able to kind of come up with like the weird stuff, I guess, in terms of like, because a lot of that is accidental. I don't really, it's not like I have it fully sketched out, or sometimes I would have like an idea sketched out, but within the details of that, like I just kind of like shut my brain and just kind of like, kind of just play. That's all I can kind of like, like all this stuff, all this forms within the forms, you just have to kind of like play while also keeping in mind, so it's a switch of analytical and kind of feelings. Because like, maybe I'm being too feely right now and it's drowning the forms. I'm not seeing the character anymore. Switch back to my analytical brain. Okay, where are the primaries? I gotta like go down subdivision levels in ZBrush, smoothing that out, so when I go back up, you see the big primaries again, right? Yeah. Right.
I feel like over time, because I totally understand and I can relate. I think I'm slowly getting to a point that I can start shutting my brain down a little bit and kind of letting it happen without turning into a big mess and without turning into horror, because that's what usually, like in the beginning, used to be. Like, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna design this thing, and then like it doesn't look good, right? So I think over time, I'm developing my own intuition in a way that I have to force myself down. Like, I don't want to think too much now, and then I do something, and I'm like, oh, okay, this could be that, and which I usually call, I'm actually designing in that moment, because But I think you've been doing that for a very long time already. And but some of the choices you make, do you spend a lot of time looking at like animal references, or like nature or other people's work? Like, what's usually your design process like? Or when you want to start something, do you just, I guess it depends, right, on what you're doing, but just kind of in general terms?
I think if I were to think about that, let's see, like say for, maybe not this one, like say maybe for the more alien kind of fleshed out characters, what I would do is it always comes from a sketch first, right? I'm always sketching like, oh, this is interesting.
And then paper, you mean like pen and paper? Pen and paper,
yeah. So when I have the idea of it, then I start looking at like there's one creature that I made that looks like a hippo, right? Kind of a hippo alien. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. This could be a hippo right here. Now I want to really see kind of what hippos look like, because I feel that it's always good to have some form of
grounded.
Grounded. What's that thing when you're like relatability? Like this one, kind of more the skin. I forgot what I used, but I remember looking at some kind of more translucent skin. But for the hippo alien, definitely like some hippo details. I see. And then from there, I don't like get too caught up in that. It's just like, okay, looking at some of the references. And I think I might have learned this from Carlos, because I remember he told me like, he looks at references and then he puts that all away, and then it's kind of all stored in your memory banks, right? And so when I start kind of just really going at it. It just kind of, it's hippo-like, but not really. But I don't really care. And as long as there's some imprint of that, like this dragon, like I don't even think I really looked at scales, and you can kind of tell it's I'm not too happy with it, but yeah.
So you just kind of let it flow, I guess, right? Like that's all.
Yeah, he's kind of like like this guy too. It's just like detail, like how what makes it interesting, that creates the tension, right? For King Kong, like to communicate the scale of the creature as well. Like I've got no reference for that, right? Like in terms of a gorilla, there's no like a building sized gorilla I can look at. So it's kind of just like inventing, and that's where I think the fun and creativity comes from, right? And makes it unique as well, is when you kind of start inventing things from a basis of like maybe an original reference or something.
For those starting out, how can they not mimic the process, I guess, because that is going to be very hard, but like what kind of exercises would you recommend to stimulate them to be able to get to this point eventually? Because I don't think it's going to be right away, right? Like, oh, I'm just going to, like start designing and then they're going to be able to do that. You've been doing this for, quite some time. And I think it takes a lot of practice. What kind of exercises do you think it would be good for people to, want to develop more of this side of their skills?
I think looking at a lot of things, and, I think that'll also all depend on the person's interest as well, right? Like if I'm very interested in many things, so I like looking at a lot of things and sort of like the weird, what would be kind of, this would be weird with this. So I think a lot of that, you have to kind of have that personality, a weirdo personality, I don't know. But in terms of practice, and I don't know if this works for a lot, or if it's specifically me or people like my type, we're just like always sketching and kind of experimenting. Because I know some people are different in that they really kind of want to be more like fully analytical, right? Like, my process is not like Gio's where it's touchy-feely, but more like Miro board of reference, and that's perfectly fine too, right? So different personalities. But if you, the viewer, is watching this and you're like, oh, I'm more like Gio, then what I would say is definitely sketching a lot is just kind of getting my hands flowing, right? Like, and my brain just shutting off. Because, like when you're on the phone and you're drawing at the sticky pad or the yellow, sticky note without thinking, that's a good practice actually. Because that's sort of like how I work in many ways, is I'm able to kind of just like shut my brain off and kind of just, like let it flow without too much analyzing. So sketching for me is that way of working, where I'm just like on my sketchbook. I got to be in my new, my sanctuary with a view, and kind of just like sketching, listening to music, putting myself in that kind of mind space, and then just looking at many things that interest me as well. Looking at fruit, looking at and when I'm at the grocery, I'm always like looking at potatoes. Like I think I mentioned this in one of the talks that I did. It's just like forms, and just something interesting to kind of build up my library of design. So yeah.
I think the sketching you mentioned, it's interesting, and I've seen rarely you post some of those, I think, right? But it's not common for you to be, like posting the sketches of some of these things, right? Mm-hmm. And do you think the sketch that you do on paper, is it just like a means to an end? Or because I feel like a lot of us, when we are sketching, and because of social media, because of all of the draftsmen out there that are amazing, right? Like we tend to compare the type of sketch we are doing with what they call sketches, and they are like final artwork, you know what I'm saying? Like the quality of the line. And do you have any thoughts on that? Because I was in the beginning very intimidated by just sketching, because the sketches, there might be some nice ideas on the sketching, but the actual presentation of the sketch itself was very like rudimentary, I guess. Does that make any sense to you? Like what I'm saying? Like it's
well, if I'm to kind of parse it, like you're saying, like posting sketches in social media without like there's a certain level of judgment kind of we bring onto itself.
When you are sketching, are you concerned with the presentation of the sketch, or are you just kind of note taking or just kind of trying to let ideas flow? Because when I'm writing, for example, I just want to put down my thoughts and construct, ideas. I'm not necessarily looking if my lines are beautiful, if my typography,
Yeah,
my calligraphy,
turning, whatever. Yeah,
it's presentable, right? Is that how you approach this? Because I would imagine if you are thinking about present, and I could be wrong, but I would imagine if your drawings were meant to be presented, you would be presenting them as well.
Yeah, no, yeah, I see what you're saying, and you're exactly right. Like for me, sketch is a utility, right? It's not like I hesitate to even post it because, like you said, it's note taking. Because I would never present myself as someone who does 2D traditional work in that sense. So I rarely post sketches on Instagram as posts, but rather just stories. It's like, hey, this is sort of like a cool thing I think I'm excited about, right? Yeah.
Okay.
But I would never present it as like, look at this work, this gallery of sketches. Because that's not me. So yeah, I just kind of use that as sort of like a floor plan of what I kind of want to do. And then I would just bring that into like Modeler or Medium or ZBrush as reference images to, if even, sometimes maybe I'll sketch into 3D, but yeah, it's sort of just like what you said, the means to an end, I guess, right?
Yeah. Oh, that's cool, man. So hopefully that inspires a lot of people here to do more sketching and like move more the pen on paper, right? Like
without any judgment on yourself, because I think that's like even I think some artists that I've talked to, they're even afraid to kind of make a mark on a sketchbook because they're like, well, this isn't good, this isn't like, what am I doing? I'm not like so and so who's amazing at it. Like, no, this is you. This is like your diary, right? This is your sketchbook is for me, one of my most valuable things I own are my sketchbooks, because I have loads and loads of ideas in there that I can go back to and go, okay, this would be good for this would be good for that. These are like from your creativity onto the page so you remember. It doesn't have to be beautiful, but rather it's something for you to chronicle so that you can get back to.
That's awesome. That's super inspiring. What are your main inspirations right now? If you could name a few, and I know this is very hard, but and I know it changes, right? Like you mentioned in the beginning, you are drawing inspirations from many different things and all of that. But right now, like, what have you been looking into, or some, whatever comes to mind?
I look at a lot of French animators, like the Marguerite Permuso. I forgot her full name, but just like very beautifully animated and minimal. I mean, I don't know if it's minimal. It's like just compared to what we do, it's like very minimalistic, stylized works that are very, like just a lot of emotion because it's moving. And I'm also looking at a lot of artists who do stylized works. Letitia Gillette, yeah. I'm learning from her actually. So, she's awesome. She's amazing. Carol Cornell's. I mean, there's so much smartest.
Yeah.
That type of work, and my bookmarks are like filled with that stuff. So I'm looking at a lot of that. I'm also looking at a lot of graphic designers, motion design, just kind of work that is more leaning towards Adobe Illustrator, that type of stuff. So yeah, I mean, it's like it kind of changes from month to month sometimes, but what's amazing is it all kind of folds in. It all folds back in, like, you're mixing ingredients and you're making this bread, you're folding in all these like anatomy, stylized, graphic, because these are all shapes. Like, one thing I realize is like these are at the very core of it. It shares the same philosophy that I go by, which are like the importance of shapes and design. So. Yeah.
No, that's great. That's great. I've been on this phase too, exploring different things as well myself.
I've seen your work, man. You're like painting and like, dude.
Yeah, and the whole idea, like for the most part of my career, I was just sculpting, and people would talk about shapes. I'm like, what are you guys talking about? These are just forms, 3D forms, right? Like I couldn't really grasp on the idea of shapes. And after I started painting and drawing and doing more of that, now I can totally understand. Well, I can understand better than previously the idea of composition and flow and design and shape and all of that, and apply that to 3D, right? Like to like sculptures, to like forms and all of that. So
Yeah,
it's awesome.
yeah. Yeah, it's the fundamentals, man. I think that's what they should be really teaching in schools instead of detailing. Because
Did you go to school for this? Like, did you go to art school?
I mean, this is like way, way back in the day. I took a class that taught like 3D Studio DOS and Max V1. So you can't do any form related stuff in those, but it's like point by point, right? So yeah, I went to like school a long time ago for like a cheap course, but didn't really do much. Like my learnings were all from like in production at ILM or the companies that I worked for. Yeah.
Right on. How do you balance all of this, right? Like all of these crazy ideas and all of this personal work and desire to evolve, to push, with having a life outside of work and, you know, the mental health aspect of it too? Because I've went through a couple burnouts myself, and I'm, you know, slowly finding peace and finding what we can call balance. But how do you go about it?
I go about it by exactly doing that, the balance. I don't do this like constantly, you know, I don't, I'm not at my desk, and I am lucky that, you know, I'm not in a scenario where like back at ILM, you know, I had to be at my desk. There's no balance of the force. There's no balance there. Because that's just the nature of the work, right? You had to be, you know, like pumping out the work. But now I'm in a good position in my life where I prioritize that balance. You know, mental health is very much important for me, and you know, especially after, you know, COVID and the pandemic hit, there's a lot of that was, I think, a good opportunity for me and a lot of people to think about like where all of this plays into, right? Like our work versus really what matters. And so I prioritize that, and by doing that, I find that I'm more creative. I'm more able to come up with the ideas. Like the stuff that I'm coming up with now is like even like pre-pandemic, I would have been like really struggling to come up with like a lot of this, but because I've and you know, there's still, you know, always work to be done to calibrate yourself mentally and all that stuff. That's always a work in progress. But when I started doing that work, I'm able to kind of just flow more and be more have more of a sense of lightness and fun when it came to like the ideas that I brought to the table as well. So yeah.
Do you have any sort of things that you pay attention? Or do you just feel like, oh, this is not, like I'm kind of getting tired, or I don't want to do another piece, I don't want to do another personal work? Or do you try to listen to any sort of like signs or something for these moments of up and downs?
You know, when I feel anxious, I can kind of feel it in my stomach and your chest, or there's just that familiar kind of heaviness, and when I'm starting to feel that, I'm kind of like, okay, wait a minute, you know, like, because that was the norm, like in my previous career, like it was that, like for many years that was the normal thing, is just like this heightened feeling,
tension,
that tension, right, and that degrades you throughout the years. And so when I start feeling that, I'm like, okay, well, what is causing this? What am I really worrying about? You know, because I want to pinpoint that, and maybe it's not really even something that I should worry about, or it's because my old programming. I'm like, oh, maybe I'm putting too much stress in this because I feel that they expect too much. When if I verify, it's like, oh, okay, it's not really a big deal or whatever. Or when I am feeling that, I just make it a point to kind of just like, okay, I'm able to kind of, you know, because of the work that I do, like, you know, fortunately I'm able to kind of go, okay, I'm just going to take a long walk, take a hike. You know, I'm able to do that with my current work right now, so I'll take advantage of it, and then do the work when I'm perfectly okay again or calibrated because I do it 10 times better with
Right.
that versus not, right? So,
Yeah, I know. I totally relate to it, and I have a hard time giving advice to people starting out because, and I think it's similar to, in your case, based on what you just said, but the first 10, 12 years of my career was just a constant drill. I was just on
yeah.
this endless pursuit of getting better and working overnight and all of that, right? And finding very little moments of peace and restfulness in that. And because of that, and because not because everything, but because most of that, I was able to, you know, maybe develop myself as a professional, like get better at work, you get, new positions, whatever, like different studios opportunities and all of that. But in hindsight, that totally programmed myself into this constant mode of like you cannot rest or you always have to be anxious, right? And now I'm actually suffering because all of that, and that's what I need to recalibrate, which I've been doing for the past 3-4 years, and it's getting better and all of that. So it's been a learning process for me, right? Basically similar to what you just described. But how do you think we can advise people starting out that they have to work hard because it's a very competitive market if they want to get into this industry, but at the same time, maybe don't overdo it in a way?
Yeah.
I struggle here because I don't want to say like,
Don't
just
work hard.
do it. Yeah, don't work hard. Exactly. Yeah.
See, that is very, very tricky. And I've struggled with this too because I think the unfortunate case is the culture of our industry is built upon the fact that, the non-artists, the ones who are controlling all the schedules, do take advantage of artists because we're excited, we're passionate, and so it's built on that basis of that culture. And so to tell advice to a student or someone wanting to get into this industry to prioritize mental health, and that's gonna it doesn't quite fit in terms of like maybe the longevity or even the possibility of them getting a job, right? But on the flip side of that, I don't ever want to glorify like passion. We're coming to our company, we're passionate. So something I think has to happen culturally that I'm hoping that all these companies would prioritize the balance aspect, because if that is a scenario, then what I would tell a student is fight everything tooth and nail to achieve, to get that, to not work yourself like we did, right? Because that was like, that was our I would say probably only option to really survive at the places that we've worked in, right? Like, so but in this reality, I don't know, that's tough, because especially with the industry being very, it's been very unpredictable, right? So I think that is something that would probably be up to the person to kind of figure out if they put everything and just go all in, or prioritize that balance and fight for it. Because if a lot more people do that, then that's where the change happens, right? And I think that's outside of outside of our control or say. But all that I could say for advice wise is always prioritize your mental health and rest, and that makes you a better artist. Even just speaking as even not non-professionally, but you as an artist, like go out there, see the world, take it all in, and then do your art, because that becomes a better result from it. So yeah.
I think the industry as a whole, it is changing, slowly, but I think it is, like, at least when I got into games AAA like 10 years ago, there was this pride of, crunching and doing all of these crazy hours. Now, like, it's actually, you're not even supposed to say these words anymore, right? And I think for better. And it is changing. Also, in a way, it feels like my generation, maybe your generation, are the ones in director positions now and kind of starting to kind of turn the ship in some of these studios too.
Yeah.
So we can help to make some of these changes, right? So I've been always encouraging people to just focus on their lives first and focus on their personal health. Like family is more important than work and that kind of thing. And I think it's changing like slowly. But the industry right now is in a different situation, I guess, than previously.
That's good. That's good because I haven't been in it for the like production or because tech also is sort of different from at least the time I was in film and games and Valve was awesome. I think that they really prioritize. I'm talking probably more in my past like early career. But a lot of the companies I've worked with, like Valve, Facebook, or Adobe, of course, has been very awesome with like work-life balance and priorities of like rest essentially. So
right on. For those who starting out, how do you any sort of like advice for them, right? Like I guess this is too generic. Like basically what I want to say is that someone that is very passionate as we are about this industry, and I can relate to this question too, because when I was starting out, I wanted to work in movies and I wanted to do all of this practical effects stuff that eventually when I got to a point that I could do it, they didn't exist anymore. And the industry is changing and doing this and that. Do you have any sort of like thoughts on any advice? Like I can just answer before so you can see where I'm headed. Like I think there's like we need to be pursuing our passion regardless, and there's always going to be room for doing what we do, but maybe you have a different take. Or
so the question is, what is my advice for
say someone is in school right now and they love video games. They love, all of this industry, right? Like, but it's very competitive right now. It's kind of ups and downs. It's kind of a little bit unpredictable, as we spoke.
Yeah.
Should they go ahead and pursue it, or should they, maybe evaluate, consider something else?
That's tricky because obviously I guess when I was starting out, like, it was such a different environment, and now, just the amount of people doing this and the competition, like I would not survive if I was like starting now, right? Like, so, but in terms of like pursuing something because of your passion, I think to a certain extent, right? Like I think, if you're passionate about this, say video games and film, or let's pick just even one. Say me as a student, I want to get into this industry because, Geo of way back when I grew up in Star Wars. I really want that credit, that film credit. So it's my passion to make it into ILM in 2024, right? Given the market and the amount of people who are also out there competing with like the Glaucos, all these amazing artists, and I'm starting out, and I would definitely say pursue that passion and study what they're doing and like really focus on your art to a certain extent, because you could keep doing that, and I've seen people like continue, and then they put themselves in a position where like, crap, like years now I haven't found a job. What do I do? Should I drive an Uber? Should I like literally I've had these conversations, and what I would say to that is, if your passion is film, and in this day and age of competition, maybe expand that. Okay, what else is out there? Video games, okay. Maybe I'll do video games because that's more viable, but I'm still able to do my art and craft. Oh, but that's a lot of competition now, man. That's like, what else is out there? Tech, right? Tech, it's at least when I started, it was emerging. So the availability of jobs and the pay and all that stuff is just like pretty viable. But I knew that back then when I was trying to convince some of my, film friends, like, it's not as sexy as film.
Yeah.
But it's still a viable thing, because from there you're still able to do, it's kind of like I think at a certain point, if you go too deep in your passion, then at the end of the day you have to put food on the table, right? So
Right.
to what extent are you willing to go to achieve that passion? And that all depends on the person. And they could go like, I'll go all the way, and then they hit the jackpot and they're like at the dream company, right? So I think, but for me, I'm more on a pragmatic sense of like, pursue that for sure, but also look at what's out there, and not be too stuck on that one thing. Easy for me to say, because when I started, I was like, my dream was to go to ILM, and I got there. But if it was me talking to myself, like, now, young Gio, now I would probably go, there's so many more other options out there that are also as interesting. Maybe I'll do this, maybe I'll do that, or this. So
Stay open to whatever comes to, right? Yeah.
stay open. I think that is the most important thing one can do in this day and age, is stay open, given, sort of like, again, the job market, and it's ever shifting. Like, you have to be able to maneuver, and it's all, you're doing the same work. Not exactly the same, but you're flexing the same creativity and technical know-how and all that stuff for the most part, right? So
Yeah, I tend to think about that too. Like when I started, back in Brazil, very little access to information. Handful of people have achieved, like success in their careers in this field from Brazil. Fausto, Chris, and a bunch of others. But
yeah,
it was still like very hard. No companies in Brazil doing this for the most part, like no game studios, none of that. So if you think about that from that perspective, today we have work remote, we have many more studios, many more roles, at the same time, many more people too, much more. So yeah, I don't know which one is worse, but I don't think it was easier before, in a way. So yeah, no, I'm with you there. I think you should just don't put the blinders on too early, because it may hurt you too. Stay open, I guess.
I mean, be passionate, but still be open eventually, right? Like, if you're sensing that it's just, you need to maneuver or pivot.
Yeah, maybe you need to go there first to be able to get there, right? Like, if you keep just kind of hammering.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good one, because a lot of it is not like me, it's not a linear path to get to ILM. I had to go all the way to the alphabet and then circle back, and then found myself to my dream job. So it's not like, so that is a good addition to it, is that it's not a linear path. So by being open, you're able to kind of just like do these other things, and then plan better to get to your dream job, I guess, right?
What is your dream job now these days?
I'm lucky to say that I'm in my my dream job.
Or maybe what is your dream? Like, what keeps you motivated to keep studying and pursuing? Maybe like what do you want to do? Not necessarily at Adobe or at at Substance, whatever. Like, it's more like, I want to direct, or I want to be able to do this. I want to do my own short movie. I want to do my feature film. Maybe from that perspective.
I think eventually, and I think as I've gotten older, this sort of desire has been a little bit more intense. My dream eventually is to just like be, like a positive force in the community for artists, be a resource. Oh, but continue like what you're doing, and like just really being inspired by that, and just kind of being a sort of like a resource to help disseminate information from whatever experience I've had to those who are just starting out, but in a way that feels organic. Like I want to keep doing that, because I think as I get older, I've already achieved a lot of success, my own personal definition of success, right, for my career, and I want to of course keep doing that. Like, Adobe's huge. What's after Adobe? I don't know. I haven't thought about it yet, but I want to keep doing that. But like the overarching thing is all that feeds into helping people, in whatever way that I can. So yeah, I think that's just always been my goal, and to always be better and do new things. Just always experiment. So.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I'm on a similar path these days now too, with the podcast, the YouTube channel, and all of that. And getting back into this groove of connecting with those starting out, with other artists that are in similar mindsets. And I think it's really refreshing to talk to students and to be able to share what we know and do this back and forth. It feels so good.
Like just seeing them like be interested, like going to Lightbox, for example, talking to them, and they're like, oh wow, like kind of like, yeah, it feels good, awesome. Like because you're helping them. So
that's awesome, man. Are we getting some classes next year or workshops? Are you planning some of that?
Yeah, no, I eventually want to do a workshop. Talking to a group possibly in Portugal.
Nice.
So yeah, but that's a lot. When I did my class, I remember how much work that is. So I'm like, man, am I ready to get back into that? So, but I'd love to keep teaching and start getting back into that. But kind of like what you're doing, I want to start doing like these videos on Instagram, just sharing my process and my thoughts on like workflow stuff and philosophies and stuff like that. So maybe starting from that for now. Yeah.
No, that's great, man. And for those of you who haven't checked, go check it out, because I think last one you posted was the rake brush, like the tendons and all of that, which I saw that rake brush, which I never seen before for some reason, from Ryan Kingsley.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been using that since that video, because it just feels so natural. It feels like clay. I'm like, wow, this is mind blowing.
It's almost like my replacement for clay buildup for building up forms as well, not just like adding the rhythm to it, right? It's just like I'm like, I mean, I still use the build-up brush, but and I saw that witch that you did. It's like,
oh, right on.
It looks so good, man. Yeah, and the stuff that Ryan was doing, which was really what got me into it. Like, holy cow, man! The way he just uses it is just flipping amazing. Like that guy.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome, and I'm hoping to see more of that. Like more of all of these people have been learning all of these things on their own. Let's just share and let's get the word out there. Let's get all together.
Ryan's rake brush, Pablo Munoz Gomez's Geo brush that he would and he has other brushes that I use too. So it's like all out there, man.
No, that's rad, man. That's rad. So, Gio, I have this thing that I told you before, obviously, to bring up a couple names that I've been calling "Let's Give the Spotlight," or people in the industry that you think should deserve more attention right now, because they are doing great stuff. And you gave me 3 names. You want to go over with some of them right now together? Let's just kind of look at their work.
Yeah. My work, yeah. So I suggested myself.
So I have here Staff Creek. Hopefully, I'm pronouncing that correct. And
yes. I didn't want to overthink the names, because I have a lot of names, so it's like the first 3 definitely, Steffi Creek here, amazing artist. It's she's just got a good sort of experience with both video games and films, and then her work. She loves animals, as you can see here. It's just got this very naturalistic feel to it. I actually worked with her with the elephant for this project, and it was stunning. So she really delivered on this one. But I figured mention her because she's a badass, and
that's awesome.
Yeah.
No, that's great. Yeah, I remember seeing this when this came out. And I also have Carol.
Yeah. Carol, who I'm always a big fan of Carol's work.
Me too. Yeah.
Yeah. So
she's great.
Yeah, she really goes hard on this is the kind of stuff I'm studying, right? So I look at how she achieves a lot of the design, because there's one thing to look at it in 2D, but to translate that in 3D, as a 2D sketch where you know, how do you translate all those lines into a dimensional thing? And I think, yeah, her work definitely she's just an awesome artist in general. Like,
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, and I like that her work feels different too. Has like personality. It's not the common sort of stylized, very kind of. It's more nuanced and it's more like bold decisions. I guess it's a little bit
yeah, like there's
different.
which one was it? She did one with a yeah, the fox with the long ears. Like this was beautiful. I don't know if this was her design or it was someone else, but I think it might have been her design. But just the execution, I feel like is just yeah, it's unique, right? Because she has this great skill with the rendering side too, so that technical aspect. So instead of it just being all flat, she added that perfect kind of balance of like detail and stylization, I feel.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, look at that. That's like
No,
the
that's
rim
gorgeous.
light and all that. It's, yeah, like you're right. Like it's just a nuanced attention to the presentation. So.
Yeah. And you also sent me
Yeah. This particular gentleman,
Aitor Perez
Aitor.
Alonso.
I'm sorry for
Aitor Perez
my
Alonso. Yeah, my bad if I'm
yeah.
pronouncing it wrong, but
Yeah, no. Aitor messaged me on LinkedIn and was just kind of, you know, he was showing me this this plugin he made for Blender, and I was just like, because I believe he's a modeler by trade, and I'm always impressed with, because I can't do it, like, you know, like I'm gonna, you know, build a tool that that does exactly what I hope I want to do with my, you know, what I'm thinking. He did that, but look at this, like
it's Gio's technique. It's the
Geo,
Gio's VR modeling technique. I can
that's
totally see
exactly
that
what
right
yeah,
away. Yeah,
So it's that, but in desktop form, right? Like
that's awesome.
the
Yeah.
layers of geometric shapes you're building, and then I believe you can pose it too. So it's almost like what's the ZBrush posing tool?
Z spheres.
The Z spheres. So I wanted to highlight him because I think, you know, like he definitely, this kind of work definitely is worth taking notice and to spread the word there, because, you know, I think this is a very useful technique, because I do this in VR, and to be able to do this in desktop. Now I probably have to learn Blender to be able to do this, but you know, I mean,
No,
look at that, man.
that's gorgeous. Yeah, I after I started modeling in VR, you know, with all of your tips and all of that too, I actually started incorporating a lot of this into my ZBrush work too, just kind of inserting forms, and because depending on the model and depending on how I'm feeling, it really helps me to just focus on, you know, different steps. Like it's just kind of very segmented sort of
Yeah.
like approach, and depending on the day, I guess, it really helps to create different things and to kind of shape.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for showing me that many years ago, and it really changed the way I see a lot of these too.
Oh no, thank you for mentioning that. And I'm glad. Yeah, because it's just like shape. You're playing with shapes, right? At the basis of it, it's like non-destructively moving shapes around if they're separate, and then merging it and doing the more gestural stuff. But yeah, that's
And you can think about the overlaps too, and I think that's part that's very crucial, because you can play with the overlaps, you can see where they are overlapping, and
yeah,
sort of like create.
that crease that's like important, because how you choose to smooth that out or retain it is what gives the sense of form, right? Like all of this stuff, that's like the overlaps, and you can communicate that best, I feel, with separate layers. I mean, you can do that in clay buildup too, but that's, for me, it takes a lot longer, right? So
And it's different, right? Like, because then you are building the forms, like, to get like that sharp overlap and kind of smooth it out. Like, I feel like it takes a different it has to be very intentional that you're gonna be able to actually carve that deep and then kind of, you know, like bring it back up. So it creates a different feel.
There's no follow, like, because by overlaps,
right? Yeah.
You in your head you kind of complete the shape inside. Whereas if I'm sculpting it, I don't get that sense as much with if I kind of just like brush it in, like it's kind of there, okay. But with the overlap, it's like I know that there's like it goes in further, right? Instead of like kind of maybe an emboss is how I kind of see the more kind of build-up-y thing.
It's the follow through, and I've been doing a lot of that. And you see like people drawing, Carlos, you know, a lot of people drawing, they actually go through the form across. Right, like, and I've been doing a lot of that lately. Just kind of, maybe if I'm constructing the forms, just kind of doing big brush strokes and across, like, let's say the back. Like, I'm not thinking about the muscles anymore. I'm just thinking about that movement. Yeah, and then the muscles will fall into place. It's similar to you know to what you're describing. So
yeah, the cool. Follow through. Yeah, I heard that first from Scott Robertson, I think, like the follow through. Yeah, I was like, oh man, it applies to creatures too.
So, right on. Any last message you want to send out to those who follow you or who are watching, listening to this?
I just want to say thank you for all the support, for those who follow me and have expressed, you know, such kind words and have been asking for you know, plans if I'm doing mentorships and stuff like that. What I want to say to that is next year, I will be more involved in the community because also of my role at work, right? Like being more interactive with the community. So I'll do a lot more videos, talks. I'm going to copy what you did with the art group. The sort of
do it,
yeah. So just figure out more ways to help and be more at service to those who want it, you know. So yeah,
that's amazing. Can't wait, man. Can't wait. I'll be there, cheering and helping you and spreading the word. And yeah, it's one big community, and let's all
be positive, man. That's all. Yeah. That's all I want. Like, you know, like all this sort of negativity that, you know, and I, you know, took part into it. It's like we can't help it, but let's just keep it positive, you know. So,
1,000%. Yeah. Thanks so much, Gio. Again, it's such a pleasure to be, you know, talking to you as always, but to have hear you on the show and being able to, you know, go a little bit deep on some of these philosophical aspects of what we do and sharing all of your insights. I'm sure people will love it. So thanks again.
Thank you again for having me. So.
Right on, man.